Hello, everyone. Welcome to Turning Your Challenges to Triumph. My name is Nancy Brewington. I'm the owner of Hands in Harmony Wellness Company. Turning Your Challenges to Triumph is about looking at all the different challenges that we're all faced with every day. And then letting you know that one, you're not alone. Everyone's facing these challenges, and you'll find that there's some people facing the same challenges that you are. But the key thing with this program is that letting you know that these challenges is not to keep you down, because we're going to provide you resources and information to turn your challenges to triumph. So I'm really excited on this segment that we have today. I have a dear friend of mine, Stephon, I'm sorry. So I have my guest is Stephon Kennedy. I've met her almost about 4 years ago now at a networking event that she was a part of. But now Stephanie is with Physician Mutual Insurance Company. And what we're going to talk about, something that we all have a problem with, that's keeping our financial house in order. It is a challenge that we're all facing. And I believe with this pandemic and some of the impacts that this pandemic has had on everyone, is showing you that your biggest challenge is you don't have any foundation, you don't have a strong foundation, and your financial house is your biggest challenge as far as keeping it standing. So thank you, Stephon, for being a part of our talk today. And so if you could just give us, audience, a little bit of information about yourself, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Well, thank you, Nancy, for inviting me. Like Nancy said, my name is Stephon Kennedy. I am a licensed insurance agent, and I'm working for Physicians Mutual Insurance Company. They are a mutual company, which means that there's no stockholders, that the policyholders are the stockholders, and their interests come first. So I think that's always best because rates are not driven by stockholders' need to make more money. So typically that means it's going to be much more equitable. I am not native to San Antonio, but this is where I live now. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Michigan. But I've been down here quite a few years. And I started in the insurance business actually 4 years ago, right around when I met Nancy. I left another field, and I'd always kind of had an interest in insurance. And I'm saying insurance because that is what I do, and we do financial planning and insurance, and a lot of people don't realize how linked those two are. Typically, people who have a strong background in financial planning have a strong background in insurance. And I'll just explain a little bit, hopefully, as we go back and forth with Q&A. And so I did have an interest, and so I just found that ties in with my passion to help people. So, and to learn new things and to share new things, because a lot of us, particularly women, and particularly I've found POCs, people of color, these are not typically conversations we're included in. So just to be another resource.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. And it kind of brings me back to the time when we did have a similar talk about financial house and getting that in order. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why, if you could touch on that, why is our financial health such a challenge for people? What is causing this challenge for everyone? Do you have any insight on that?
Well, part of it is the times are changing. So I grew up with my parents who worked jobs, the same jobs for 20, 30 years. And that was typically what people did. Okay, you worked one job and you worked it throughout your entire life, and it was a good job and it provided all your needs. As that has changed, because that's no longer our society, people change jobs much more frequently now. I've had more jobs probably in my lifetime in the workforce, which is far less than my dad had his time in, than my dad had in his entire life. Okay, he worked for the same company for 32, 33 years. Wow. And my mother worked for two companies. She worked for a doctor's office, and then she worked for another company. Also, the difference is retirements. The last number I heard was somewhere around 10% of companies in America give retirements, and retirement plans are different than 401ks. That's different. A retirement plan is something that the company gives you, and it's free. Okay, they've invested money so that when you retire at whatever they deem the retirement age is, they pay you out, and typically it's for the rest of your life. That has changed. A lot of companies no longer, and even big companies, no longer offer retirement plans. It's cost prohibitive. It's just incredibly expensive. Also, the rise in healthcare. People don't want to talk about that, but healthcare is incredibly expensive, and that's a huge expense for a lot of companies. So they're trimming out how much they're paying towards your healthcare, so that comes out of people's pockets. Also, companies, my parents have healthcare for life. That is few and far between. In this town, it's a little bit different because it's a military town. But even from what I'm understanding with the military, that will change as well. So that's part of it. Another thing, we're not ever taught this. No one ever teaches you. When I was in school 100 years ago, we did a little 1040 easy form. We had an economics professor, and it was very rudimentary. Show us how to do our little income tax return if we worked, or he did a mock one for us. I think they showed us how to write a check, not really how to balance a checkbook. Talked about savings, but didn't really tell us what that was for or how much we should be saving. So these are conversations that are not had in things that are not taught. We go to the doctor, a lot of us, on a regular basis. You know, as we go for our well woman checkups, we go for our yearly physicals. As you get older, you go for all of those other tests. No one ever goes for the financial checkup. It's just not something we do. And then lastly, I think, Nancy, there's a sense of embarrassment because people don't want to admit what they don't know. They don't want to admit things are bad. And we are in unprecedented times where people who've never struggled financially are struggling now through no fault of their own. And that's what a lot of people think. I'm struggling financially. It's something I did wrong. You know, none of us caused the pandemic. I have a good friend of mine, her partner's been out of work since the beginning of this because he worked for a restaurant and did very well. So what do you do then? So I think those are just some of the things that I see that are an impediment to us keeping our financial house more in order.
I really love the point that you made out. And the fact is, one, you made the point that we're not taught financial planning. So where do you get to learn about financial planning? You cannot get it from your parents because your parents do not want to tell you a lot about financial planning, only because it might be an embarrassment to them to tell you, the child, what's going on or not going on financially. So I think if you're not getting taught by your parents, if you're not getting taught by your school, then who's telling you about financial planning? And the point that you made about the fact is that back way when a person works at the one job forever and you are expecting some kind of income once you retire, but that's no longer the case. So that is the biggest challenge that we're having, is because we're not taught. When you said that, it kind of reminded me when I was a single parent for about 10 years when I was in the military, and I had mutual funds for my son. And at every month when he was about 5 or 6, I would show him his statement of how much money we had saved up and everything, and how that money is going to be used for him later on in college. Well, he had gotten more education on that than I had ever received. And now he was out of his job right before the pandemic. And I was really worried because he works from home and actually he's living in Spain. And the key thing was I was worried about him finding a job. And he says, "Mom, you don't have to worry. I've saved up enough money to last me for a year or 2 years." So he learned something that I had taught him early on. And I was so proud of him because, but that's the key. A lot of children, a lot of adults are not taught financial planning. So that makes it a big challenge for people. So as far as resources, what would you recommend a person to do when they're having difficulties with that?
So one thing I realized, and a lot of these things I'm telling you, I'm speaking of what I know, because just because you do this for a living doesn't mean that you're not impacted, because in some way we're all impacted by the pandemic, and a lot of us adversely, unless you're e-commerce, unless you're Amazon. Most people have been impacted adversely. One thing is to get your arms around your situation. And it's very daunting because you don't want to look at it, but you have to know what you're working with to know where you're going. You know, it's kind of like mapping out your route. So what we're doing here, we are in a great time where you can Google information, you can go to YouTube, you can listen to podcasts. And I always tell people, you don't have to wonder about too many things in this world long, because it's always a quick Google search. So there's tools online to help you. There's tools online to help with budgeting. Okay. And then I always tell people there's money that you're spending that you don't even realize. There's things that you set on auto pay that you no longer need or you could do without. There's just the adherence of making a grocery list. There's a little meme that's out that says, I'm an HEB on vibes, which is true. You're just in there and maybe you're on your list and you could be spending an extra $10 or $20 a trip, which isn't a lot, but over the course of a month. So I always tell people, and reach out to a financial planner. Most of the people who are in this industry will do some Q&A at no charge. That's another thing. We always think, oh, it's going to cost a lot of money. Not necessarily, not necessarily. It's a service that most people offer their clients at no charge. But again, there's always online things that you can be directed to. The biggest thing that helped me in my saving, because I was a bad saver, was just to have it automatically taken out of my account every month. Boom. And it goes to a savings account. And I'm often shocked when I look, I'm like, oh, okay. If I had to take it there physically, like we used to back in the day before you could do, and see some people who are tuning in don't understand this, when we actually had to go inside the bank and deposit a check, when you couldn't just click, 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 or do it on your phone. So there's a lot of resources. So I would say, figure out, know how much money you bring in, how much money that you bring in, what's coming in and what are your expenses. That's the first challenge right there. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know how much money they make. And I understand if you're in a fluctuating industry, maybe you don't work the same hours every week, or maybe tips are included in that. So, I mean, there is a reason for that.
Right, right. But in knowing what you're bringing in, they should also know the expenses. And there's a mentality of I need and I want.
Right.
And I think this I want something has caused a lot of people to go beyond their budget. So what can you say to those type of two different types of thought process? I need and I want.
I think that I believe once you take care of all your needs, then the wants can come in. Okay. I don't think we are born to work every day and then die and not have any pleasure. I don't believe in that. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you, and at being of a certain age, and I just said this to a younger group, I said, first of all, you can't live like a reality star. That's not your reality. That's their reality. Okay. And you can't live like your parents when you haven't put in the time. So there is that, you know, everybody wants, you know, I hear kids talking about the kind of car they want. Can you afford that car? Can you afford that payment? And just because you can afford it. Now, my dad taught me this. He's a depression kid though. So his mindset was a little bit different. Just because you can afford it doesn't mean you have to. You know, so there's some self-control about it. And then also we're all guilty of this. Retail therapy, buying something new makes me feel better. You know, until sometime the bill comes when you can't afford it. So that's just something to think about. I don't believe in zero treats, but I believe you gotta rein it in, especially when we're in the times we're in now. You know, because, you know, it might not be the best thing to spend every dime, because who
Right.
knew? Like I did not work all last week. Like
Mm-hmm.
for the time frame, for people not in San Antonio, we were iced in, which I'm from the Midwest, wouldn't have been a big deal. We probably would have still gone to work, but it changed the game here. So you have to think about
Mm-hmm.
that.
Right, right, right. So, one, we want to make sure we see, do a budget, what we have and our expenses.
Mhm.
And then we have to go into I need and I want.
Right, right.
And then, have you worked with people and seen any success stories that you'd like to share with us?
So as far as the budgeting, I typically give people their opportunity to do that on their own, because that's a very personal thing. Now, when we
Mm-hmm.
start talking about the insurance portion of it and the protection portion and the financial house, I have worked with people with that. And I will tell you, a large part of what I do is Medicare education and helping people to fully understand Medicare. So I work with a lot of retirees. So I was able to work with somebody and get them a better plan to cover 100% of their medical expenses right before this person found out they needed a pacemaker. And it could have been much more impactful if we hadn't done it prior. Because a lot of times people don't understand, when you retire and you're the Medicare age, Medicare only pays for 80%. So you're exposed on the backside for 20%. That's a 20% unlimited. So that's 20% of a doctor's office or dialysis or a heart transplant. So I was able to get everything buttoned up for them so that she actually got a better plan than she had. So
Great,
that
great.
made me feel better. And then also from the insurance standpoint, a lot of people think insurance is a racket.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kind of
But
talk about that a little bit more.
I also hear insurance is not designed to make a family member wealthy unless you want it to do that. We can, okay? We can, but it's really designed so that your family is able to live the same lifestyle or better than they had when you were alive. So if it's a two-income family, people don't realize that when the person passes away, depending on where they worked, that may be the end of their income
Mm-hmm.
from that job. Okay, because maybe they weren't vested in their 401k. Maybe that company has no retirement, or the retirement, just so people are aware, is not 100% of your pay. It usually is somewhere around 50%. So you still had a big decrease. So we do things to help people so that their life can continue to go on. With losing that loved one is hard enough, but losing your home, your kids having to move to another school district because you can't afford to stay in your home. Those are the type of things that insurance does. And I hear people say all the time, like, I'm working these 3 jobs because I want to pass on generational wealth. Life insurance is the most cost-effective way and pretty much a guaranteed way to pass on generational wealth for a fraction of the cost. It's just understanding what that looks like.
So that's one thing we have to do is to be more self-aware. And I think
Right.
that's the key, is that a lot of people are not self-aware. They're not even self-aware on themselves as far as their financial. And then if there's a couple, a family involved, that is a very difficult question and kind of conversation for family members to have with one another, is understanding their financial situation at the time. And that's a discussion that everyone should have.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people are afraid. I know when I was in the military and I was a commander, I've had spouses that would come to me because their spouse, their husbands, they didn't know what they made. They didn't know anything about their financial situation. And sometimes they was left in the dark, and there was a conversation that people didn't want to have.
Right.
But I think that is a conversation that all people should have, and should be honest with one another if they want to go ahead and have that dialogue and that financial freedom, because COVID is very evident that we're losing a lot of young people at very early ages, and then people are left with making those decisions. What about the house?
Right.
About how to take care of the family. So that is a conversation that people should always have and should not be afraid of it. And when you was talking to people, we're talking about, you talk to them about insurance, and you talk to them about having a budget. So how do you approach them to have that difficult question?
So I always try to take the curse off of the meeting, because I've had wives call me right before the meeting. I don't know, he's upset, he really doesn't want to come. And so we work through that. And what I always tell them, first of all, this is a judgment-free zone, kind of like Planet Fitness, okay? Judgment-free. And the first step is to say, I need help. I don't understand everything. I don't know everything. And anybody who says that is probably not being 100% honest if they say they know everything and they understand everything, because typically we don't. In that there's no dumb questions, just ask. We have to get past that. And then also in a lot of groups, people find to talk about end of life they're superstitious. They think it's bad luck. Well, we're all going to go the same way. Now, we don't know the time, we don't know the day, but we all have to leave this life just as we all came in. So I think kind of like we know that's not a secret, right? So let's just be adult and responsible and mature, because that is one of the most loving things you can do for your family. A good friend of mine, her husband passed away of COVID. It's been 2 weeks now. So she texted me and asked me if I knew anybody who did medical insurance, because it was going to cost her $800 a month to stay on Cobra. So a lot of people who are listening to this don't even know what Cobra is, but so just be aware that if you are not working, if you're a staying at home spouse, and the working spouse holds the benefits, when they pass away, the employer no longer covers the spouse. You have to actively be working or be a family member. So she would have to buy it on her own at what's called a non-group rate. So she's not getting like a discount for being on with more people. So it's basically going out and buying your own insurance. And so I don't do that, but I passed her along to a friend, and she said, I just had no idea it was that much money. Those are the type of things that can drive someone into a bad situation or into bankruptcy. And actually medical expenses were, prior to COVID, the number one reason people filed bankruptcy. We'll see how it shakes out. So it's just imperative to be aware of that. And then she even said, she said she wasn't going to take his Social Security. And I was like, what do you mean? She just didn't understand how it worked. And I said, you can. Doesn't matter that he wasn't old enough to draw Social Security yet. He was, but he was still working. But even if he weren't, you are entitled as his widow to his survivor's benefits off of the Social Security. And I'm using the wrong term, but to his spousal benefits off the Social Security. So just letting people know that, there's things that people don't realize. And talk to my neighbor. She said, well, my cousin wants to draw her Social Security now. She's tired of working. And I said, is she tired of working at that place, or is she tired of working, period? And she says, that's a good question, because the longer you let it bake, the more money you get. Right. And I said, so it's just a lot of things that people don't realize. Right. If you have all the information, you can make the best decision for you at that time.
Now, one of the things you did say earlier, and that is that we have the resources of Google. And I am all for Google, researching here, researching there. But the human part, I think, of having a financial planner, of somebody that they could go to, like yourself, that they could go ahead and talk with in the beginning, and then kind of get them out to different directions, in the correct directions, because sometimes we could we could be Googling the wrong thing. And
Right.
I know as a nurse, I have people Googling everything, and they think they
Right.
had some kind of dying disease because they're looking at all the symptoms, but they're not using a professional. So we only have just a few more minutes left, but if you can, just share just a step-by-step process that a person should do, and as far as trying to get their financial house in order.
Okay. And you know what? And I should have, when I was saying Google, I didn't mean that Google would be your financial planner. So I should have been clear on that. It just answers a lot of questions. So just like any house, you want to have a good foundation. So the good foundation is going to be health insurance, life insurance, and long-term care insurance. So those are the three pillars at the bottom, the three base. Then you want to look at your roof, which is after you've done your retirement, which is in the center, kids college fund, that's your first floor, kids college fund, retirement savings, okay? Then you want to put your roof on, which is your 401k and any speculative investment. So I always encourage people, you want to have that base built. And I should have added the savings account. I'm gonna send Nancy a link so it'll be available for you to click on. So it should added the savings account. That's the bottom. Those are the three things, the emergency fund, that you want to have available to you. And you're gonna hear different things when people talk about emergency fund. We used to tell people you want to have 12 months of your expenses. Then it went to 6 months, then it went to 3 months. Now we tell people $1,000. So start with that, $1,000. And then, because once you get some confidence in this whole process, so it's health insurance, life insurance, emergency fund, long-term care, that's your base, okay? Then the center is your savings. Then you're looking at savings, retirement, 401k, retirement, and then your kids' college fund, and then your roof is your speculative investment, okay? So I just think it's important that you're aware of where you are in the building process of the house. And sometimes people have other things taken care of and other things are not, like they may be further up and maybe they're missing a floor, but you can always go back and circle back. But if you start with the basics so that you're not overwhelmed.
Right. So I like how you ended that. Do not be embarrassed no matter where you're at in your house.
We all have to start somewhere, and you cannot fix things that you don't know are an issue or that you're not aware of. Okay, in some people, the reality is this is generational. A lot of people have lived this way and they don't know any different. You know, and there's the juxtaposition to that is people who lived very well lives because they've had that foundation. They don't know a difference, right? So we cannot judge ourselves harshly or other people. We just have to take the steps to move forward.
And it's also attainable no matter where you start.
Oh, it definitely is attainable. I mean, I feel like as long as you're still living, you're still working, you still have that ability to change things. It can always be better than it was yesterday.
I love that because it can't always be better than it was yesterday, because yesterday is gone and you can never get it back. But you have today, and today you can go ahead and make your future tomorrow a lot better. I really do appreciate all of that information and all that insightfulness. And so thank you, audience, for being a part of this, and Stephon for being my guest. And I will definitely have information she's going to provide for me that will have a part of this channel, and you'll have her links and everything. And if you have any questions or any comments, please do not hesitate to have that onto our page, so that if you have questions and I'm not going to be able to answer it, I know the right source to go to, and we'll make sure that Stephon will be able to answer your questions or your concerns. So thank you so much for being a part of this, and realize that the one thing, we all have challenges, but we also have triumphs. We have to just turn those challenges into triumph with information and knowledge, and the do not give up attitude.
Right.
Thank you so much, and thank you, audience, for joining us, and y'all have a very blessed day.
Thank you.